All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. It is Thursday, July 14th, 2022. Let's go ahead and get started. I want to go back to yesterday and quickly go through it so we can get into the analysis for this morning. But just want to point out our first expected area of resistance, if you were here for the pre-market, was coming up into this pocket between 37.89 and 37.93. So that was the pocket, and then it just so happened that as the market started advancing out of the open, which was right down over here, it was sideways, but once it advanced back up, got up through the major eye level there, this was our first expected area of resistance. And sure enough, it came up, and I think we tested it 3 or 4 times. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, and a sixth time, and then finally it continued to sell off from there. So never really got appreciably above the top end. I told you focus in on either the bottom end of there at 89 or the top end around 93. Tried some shorts myself, and then from there we got the pullback, and then the bulls decided to jump in and break it higher. So the market ripped higher, and interestingly enough, came right back to 38.22. So they came right into the major eye level again. So you can see we've got a little peak down through 74, came back up, held VWAP, came right back to 74, the major eye level. Again, couldn't get through this expected area of resistance, kept coming back to the major eye level at 74, and of course, they had to go ahead and peek right through it, probably take some buyers out, and then go right ahead and rip higher, and then again, found resistance right at the next major eye level, a major area of support and resistance, and then pulled back. And where did they bounce? Right off of the highs of the morning there. So if you look back to when we found this resistance, I guess the major high there was just about 95, so about 2 to 3 points above 93 there, and that is exactly where the market came down and bounced about 8:45 Pacific, right in front of VWAP, and then came up and we made a high of the day literally about 2 points in front of the major fib line that we were watching. So high of the day was just in front of that level by about 2 or 3 points. And then it just kind of was messy and we sold off. So that's where we find ourselves this morning. The market tried to break out, just like we said yesterday. There were a lot of bullish indications for what could be a breakout. But I told you we want to basically be sellers despite that. And sure enough, didn't really get back to the high of that CPI bounce in the overnight session, and then failed. So coming into this morning, we've pushed down and made new lows in comparison to the lows we made in the overnight session from yesterday. So we're now down another 10 points. So yesterday's low was 52, our overnight low here 42. And kind of interesting to note that we're bouncing in our next area of support down here between 39 and 44. So remember, that was a little 5-point pocket that we looked at yesterday. If we end up breaking through the low of the overnight session, we were going to be targeting at least into that 5-point pocket, and then we would go step by step as things broke lower. So we're down there now. We're finding a little bit of support off of that in that pocket right there, and that's where we find ourselves coming into the open. Again, lots of little bounces by the bulls that look like there's some promise to it, and the next thing you know, it's sold off and we're down to lower lows. So let's go up to the daily. We'll take a look at that and then dial it down. So up on the daily, obviously, very bearish looking candle that closed from yesterday. Remember, we talked about there being a potential for a bullish divergence from that low based off of the RVI levels. But we did, and remember what I said yesterday, if we break the low of July 5th at 37.42, 44, I think it was, let me see. Yeah, 37.44. If that broke, then this potential bullish divergence was not going to be there. It was going to be a false signal, and that's sure enough what happened. There was, again, that attempt by the bulls to break out, but then it failed and came down, and as of right now in the overnight session, we've broken to a lower low. So that potential bullish signal is a false signal. It's no longer there, and we've pushed to a lower low, and we've got a lower low on RVI. So we've got to get rid of that. Um, Outside of that, really nothing else too important to mention here on the daily chart. Obviously, the last major signal we got was the bearish signal back on July 8th. And ever since July 8th, we've pulled back from 39.22, again, right into our expected retracement level of resistance, right to the tick to it, has failed from 39.22, and we find ourselves almost at 37.22 now. So we're almost 200 points down from the last strong daily signal. Let's go ahead and go down to the 4 hour, see if we have anything. Here's the problem with this morning. As I was reviewing everything this morning, I don't like what is forming down here. So look, the divergent analyst, the software itself, is making the argument here that if you draw a line from the low back here on July 12th all the way to where we are now, you'll see that price is obviously pushed down significantly, but RVI is actually higher than it was back when we were here. So we've got that divergence going on. Not a huge fan of that formation there, just because we've just cut through this whole part of this 4 hour candle here, and we just go right through it. Not a huge fan of that, but there is a very slight argument. I personally don't like it. So we have that. And outside of that, on the 4 hour here, nothing else to really mention. Look, if we had a really clear bearish divergence like we had, so in the overnight session here, if we were here at midnight, I would have told you this right here was a beautiful divergence. See how we've got this push to a higher RVI level. We've got a push down to a lower price. That there, even if we were looking at it just as the candle closed, I would have told you that's a beautiful bearish divergence that was forming there at about midnight Pacific yesterday, and we have sold off from there. This low here, going all the way back up to that low, not quite as sexy as this signal I just pointed out here. So hopefully you understand what I'm saying. There is technically an argument, but it's not quite the formation I like to see. So, okay, we've got that covered there. Some very slight arguments for a bullish divergence down there on the 4 hour. Let's get to the 60-minute and look at the levels we're going to be dealing with here this morning. And then we'll wrap it all up. So right now, again, we're bouncing right in our expected area of support. Again, with the 1 hour, if you look back, you could say, oh, look, this swing low back here on July 12th, all the way over to where we are now, you could say there's divergence. But again, we have to cut through all this price action to make that argument, and that's just not how I like to draw my divergences and rely on those type of divergences. But I guess you could say, you could make some type of argument that it's there. So again, a weak kind of spacious argument on the hourly and the 4 hour from down here, telling me that there's not enough strong information that we could expect there to be a huge bounce here this morning like yesterday, because yesterday we had a beautiful 4 hour and 1 hour bullish signal, and that's why we did get that nice little impulsive move in the overnight. Actually, this is from, let me go back to yesterday. I believe it was from this overnight low back over here. I've just mixed these two up. But yeah, so let's look at the levels we have here. I've spent enough time talking about this stupid thing off the lows that I don't think is going to be relevant here. So let's just talk about the levels we have. If price does end up bouncing here and coming back up, we've got a couple areas to watch. Obviously, I feel like I don't even have to talk about this anymore, but the major and minor iLevels are always going to be relevant. So be aware of that. But looking at this little area here, this swing low from the overnight session where we did get actually a really nice hourly bullish signal that I was just talking about here. This little pocket here, we've got the major eye level. So again, not too surprising. We came down right into the major structure zone and bounced right off of it, and then came right to 07, the next structure zone, and failed. But coming back up into that is an interesting little zone. So we've got the swing low at 37.73 around here. up into the orange power level at 37.76, and we've got the major eye level there. So there is a little 3-point pocket in there. I think could be a pretty significant resistance level if the bulls do start to advance higher. So be aware of that. And then obviously the minor eye level, you never know. There's another thing that I'm noticing here, and that is where the close of yesterday was, right here at 37.96. I think there is some significance to that area outside of the fact that it was the close of yesterday. We do have, going back in time, there were some pretty significant supports for hours and hours off that level in the past. A really significant resistance here, you can see on the hourly, came right to that level and got, let's see, just about a 10-point pullback off of it before we went ahead and broke through it earlier back in July 5th. So there's a lot of stuff lining up. You can see one right here. You can see the support. We pulled back right to that level, give or take a few ticks, and bounced off to continue coming higher. So a lot of stuff lines up there at 37.96. That would be an interesting level to be aware of. Again, if the bulls can make it that far. And then once we get through there, there's a couple other things here. We've got this pocket about 38.05 to 07 quarter. That is, remember, this whole area, 38.07 to 12 here, this whole pocket has been super, super strong for a lot of, even there's a lot of kind of chop through them. There's a lot of support and resistance if you zoom in to a shorter time frame at 38.12, at 38.07 quarter. But what I'm seeing here this morning is potential for there to be trouble starting at 05 up into 07. And then we do have the 50% level of yesterday lining up almost exactly with the next minor level at 12. So we've got those there. And maybe this is a good time to mention that I have put the fib level from the high at 39.22, and there it is right off that retracement level, all the way down to our overnight low. And it gives us a 38% retracement, basically right there by 38.12 and the 50% line. Here's the caveat, and you guys should be aware of what I'm going to say next. If we do continue to sell off here, this fib is going to have to be redrawn to new lows. So this 38.50 and 61 that's currently on the chart could very well change if we just push down to a new low here out of the open. So I don't necessarily want to have strict lines on there because we haven't appreciably started to hold that level and come out. So until we actually get that bounce, I'm not going to draw fib lines on. We'll just keep the fib leg there for now. So just be aware, if we do hold this low at 42 and bounce up, the 38 would be right in that pocket by 07 to 12. A little bit further, 38.22 has been a real mofo here throughout the last couple weeks. Really strong support and resistance level, given the fact that it is a major support and resistance structure zone. A little bit further from 22, we've got the 50% retrace, which again might change if we push to lower lows this morning. And then from there, notice there's a huge pocket up here. Once we get through 38.22, I gotta be honest, there might be a little bit of interesting stuff that happens around the 50% line, around this 38.31. But outside of that, I think it's a pretty straight push right up to this little pocket I drew in here, 38.48 half to 38.50. So if we do end up breaking through the major structure zone at 22, maybe something right around here. In fact, I'll just go ahead and highlight this area. I see obviously this major swing back from the 7th and some other things right over here, a lot of bouncing, and that low happens to be 32 half. So somewhere right around this, I would say 31 half to about 33. So a 1.5 point pocket. And we'll draw it out here. That should probably be a good enough length of time there. That is really the only thing I see once we get through 22 until we get all the way up here at about 38, what did I say, 48 half to 50. So from there, if we get through that 48 half to 50, obviously the major or the minor eye level is at 53. This is excuse me. This has also been a very significant level going through the last couple of weeks. So be aware of that. It also happens to be the 61.8 retracement, again, assuming we hold 42 and start bouncing up. From there, we've got the minor level at 75 and the high of yesterday. So that little pocket around 73 to 75. And then we're up to the gap that we never filled. So if you remember back to, was it, I think it was Sunday going into Monday of this week. We closed on Friday at about 39.05 half. We opened on Sunday's Globex about 3900 half. And actually, technically, we didn't really open until the regular trading hours on Monday at, let's see, somewhere right around, it's actually hard to say looking at the 60-minute chart here, but I would think somewhere around 38.77 or something. So technically, if you were looking at regular trading hours, it would be a gap from 38.77 all the way up to 39.05 half. But if you look at the extended trading hours, that is that little pocket right there. 3,900, give or take a few ticks to 39.05 half. So if we do end up breaking through yesterday's high and the 38.75 minor level, and you can see that was basically the resistance from not yesterday, but the day before that. If we get through there, this would be the next area I would expect to see some trouble. There's one other level I'm seeing in here, and I'm going to highlight it as a shaded region, and that's going to be this pocket right here from about 38.83 half to about 86. So a little 2.5 point pocket right there. I'll put that on there. And then if that breaks, it's right to the gap. So let me get this on all the charts, and we'll make it 83 half to 86. Yeah. So 2.5 points that could potentially be trouble if the bulls get through yesterday's high, and then we're right to the gap. And then it's back to the major retracement level at 39.22, the major eye level at 39.1650. And then from there, everything above here we've already talked about in previous sessions. Let me go ahead and extend these out to, I don't know, I guess probably like the 20th, because, oops, who knows when we're going to get back up there. We might never get back up there in the next few months. But never say never in the market. Remember, this thing will do things that make no sense. Look at what happened in 2020. When the whole world was crumbling, the market was pushing to new all-time highs every day. So doesn't have to be logical, but I don't expect there to be a push all the way back to 4,020 here from 37.50. But you never know. So everything up above 39.22 we've already talked about. Not going to waste time on that. And everything below the current support level that we're at, we've already talked about down here. So I'm not going to spend time listing all the levels out. So let me wrap things up here. What we say this morning? We've got some very spacious bullish arguments from the low of the overnight session at 37.42. Again, it's not the same bullish setup we saw yesterday when we came into the morning, and there was a very clear 4-hour, 1-hour, and and potential daily bullish divergence that gave us that clue we would get the bounce out of the open. This morning, it's not quite lining up as sexy. That doesn't mean that we're not going to see some type of attempt by the bulls to break out here, but we just don't have any clues from our signals that that is what we would expect to happen here. I can tell you that the 4-hour candle does have a huge wick down into that level, so we are kind of recovering out of it. Doesn't really mean too much given the context of the market, but we do have that. And the 60-minute as well has a pretty significant little dip into it, and it closed out with that doji. So outside of those wicks, nothing really too sexy for the bulls down there. But we are bouncing off of an expected support. So maybe we'll see an attempt by the bulls to push here out of the open, but I'd still be very skeptical of a bullish breakout, meaning we get through the high, the 50% level of yesterday, and then we get through the high of yesterday. I'd be skeptical of it, but if that's what starts happening, and I'm telling you right now, you cannot go into the market and only expect one thing to happen. You have to go in with every possible scenario and then just react to what ends up happening. So again, if the bulls are strong for whatever reason, if the market opens, AD lines are up at 1,000, 1,500, and the tick is bouncing above zero and pushing up into 600, 800, 1,000, we're probably going to want to be buyers until everything falls out, right? So just be aware of those major areas of resistance up above. And if the market ends up selling off this out of the open or does push and finds resistance and sells off and breaks through the low of the overnight session here, we've got all our levels of expected support to target to the downside. And I should probably extend out this is an area pocket that we've been watching since we broke above. Since June 23rd, we've been watching this pocket and we still have not made it back. So let me extend this out a couple days so we still have it on there. And extend this out. And then we'll get ready here for the open. And I'll tell you right now, I'm not looking forward to bouncing back up into everything in here. You see how congested this area is? There are some very interesting areas of support and resistance within here. I like the fact that the daily power levels actually kind of delineate all these major little structure areas, and they almost line up exactly with our major and minor iLevels. I love the fact that that's all lining up perfectly there. So if anything, if you don't want to deal with every single level in here, you might want to just use the guidelines of the daily power levels, right? Getting through each one and expecting each one to be a good support and resistance level might be a nice simple way to orient yourself this morning if they do push back up into this area. But I am telling you, I'd rather see us just start advancing lower, maybe come up right into 40.74 or maybe the close of yesterday or 50% of yesterday and then just fail and start coming down into these deeper levels. Because everything up in here is just, it's getting a little too messy. But that's what I'll leave you with here this morning. Not necessarily as strong of an argument for the bulls this morning off the overnight low, but anything's possible in the market. So if they do end up ripping higher, we would expect there to be resistance up here. So have a good day to those out on YouTube. We're going to get down to our member section here. So take care. We'll see you tomorrow.